Hey guys, usually we start off each video with saying the channel name and the book and the exercise or problem we're doing, but since everything is pretty much labeled clearly on the YouTube channel, all the videos will have the appropriate titles and you can clearly see the channel name. I probably won't do that anymore just to save on time and it gets repetitive. So let's jump into this problem here, 6, chapter 3. We've got a program. We need to design the pseudocode and the flowchart for a program. And actually, before let me show you the pseudocode real fast. Feel free at any time to stop, pause the video, and this up here, we'll get to this in a minute. But if you need to pause it just to check things out, do so. But what we have here is we need to design a program that is going to ask for a user to put in a number, and we've already determined what the number is, and they need to guess correctly. So if they don't guess correctly, we need to say your number is either too high or too low until they guess it and exit the program. So there's a few components to this problem that you don't really need, but I'll point those out. So we have a start here, and we have a way to input the guess, and then we have a while loop. So while your guess is not equal to the number that it should be, we go into the loop. This area right here, this next while loop, you don't really have to have. It doesn't say anything about this in the problem. I always like to validate the entries to make sure that they're entering something that can be used. So I'm just saying that between the numbers 1 and 10, and the book is going to have a different number here, so you're going to want to change that 10 to something different. While the number is not 1 through 10, like it might be a 0, it might be 30, then it's going to tell you to input only numbers 1 through 10. And this right here, we'll get to this in the actual code if you want to actually see how a program might work like this, but if you don't want to check that out, you don't have to. We'll go to the pseudocode, and then after that I'll show you the code. So if you do have a number that you've guessed and it's in the proper bounds of 1 to 10, then we're going to go to this area. So if your guess is greater than the number, then it's true, and then it's going to tell you your guess is too high. And then it's going to give you a way to input that guess again. It's going to loop back around to the original loop to make sure that your guess is not the number. If it is, you guessed it, stop. So let's say it's this statement is false, and it's going to go off this way. And I have this other decision right here because in the code it's weird. I tried to have an if and an else, but it seemed to only work properly if it was done where you have an if else and then a nested if inside of that else statement. For some reason, I don't know, there might be a better way to do this, but I tried a lot of different ways, and that was the way that actually worked and didn't get weird when you would enter strange things. So we've got your number being, or your guess being less than the number. If that's true, your guess is too low, and then you guess again, and you come up here. Let's go over to the pseudocode. So kind of the same thing, start, input, guess. You see the while loop here, and then we've got a nested while loop. While your guess, this is actually validating right here. So don't allow, oh, and this don't allow letters. I'll explain that in a minute. That's actually this area right here, but you don't have to have, you don't even have to have this validation here, this while loop. And you might not, I mean, you definitely don't have to have that. So we'll jump down here to the if guess is greater than number. You can see that it relates to the flowchart. Else, and see this nested if statement, nested if statement here. That's checking for the guess being less than the number, and then we end this while loop, this whole thing right here once you do guess, and then we have an output, you guessed it, and then we stop. So that's kind of how it may look. I always like to say that this is not the best answer necessarily. Um, really look through this, think about it, take your time with it. It's a good starting point. It may be a good answer. I don't know the professors you're dealing with. I feel confident in this one, but again, always double check and make sure that this is what you want. And if you think something different, like you find that, oh, I can, you can do something different with this if else statement here, that's not really the best way, then go for it. So at least there's something to work off of here if you're really stuck and having some issues. But let's look at the code here. I've declared a constant number, so you can change this to whatever you want. That's the joy of that constant there. Inside of our, oh yeah, then we've got our guess, a variable for our guess. Then we've got housekeeping function. This is just, you don't have to have this here, by the way. It's just like how you can keep track of the sections. Detail loop is typically like, this is an area where all of your, it's like where all of your calculations and the program work goes. And then end of job is usually just like wrapping up the program to make some outputs and tell you what happened. So we'll go into this detail loop area here, and you see the while your guess is not equal to the number. So if we look at the flowchart here, while the guess is not equal to the number, that's what's going on here. And now I've got this validate input area. So this is what I'm talking about. You don't have to have this, and it's always nice to make sure that they're not entering something that the program can't work with. So we've got this while guess is less than 1 or guess is greater than 10. You've got these two areas here, and I'll explain that in a minute. Enter only numbers 1 through 10, and another area to check or to have an input. Now this right here, I'm not entirely sure how to explain all this. It's fairly new to me. It works, and what it's basically doing is saying you're only allowed to enter numbers. And because your user, they could enter like a T, a Y, a D, whatever, and that's gonna mess with the program, because those would be like string variables or a character. It's not anything like integer here or double. It's not a number. So somehow the program, it gets confused by that when people enter letters, and this fixes that. It fixes that. So these 2 lines of code will fix that problem. And I'll show you that when we run it. So then we've got down here, if guess is greater than number, all of that stuff. Then we've got the else, and then we've got this nested if statement here for it being less than the number. And then we wrap it up. You guessed it. So just kind of look that over. Output. We've got a little equation here to tell you, and I've actually given the user like information. So if they guess wrong, it's gonna tell them, your guess is too high. Subtract this amount of numbers from your guess. So I've given. You don't have to do that either. I don't think the problem requires that. But let's go ahead and run this. Let me show you how it looks when it works. All right, so let's try doing 0. Make sure that validating the entry works. Oh, see, only numbers from 1 to 10. I mess up and I hit an R by accident in the enter after that. See, it won't take that, and it'll be calm about it. Won't freak out and do an infinite loop or not understand anything. Just only numbers from 1 to 10. So let's do 5. Your guess is too low. Add 2 to your guess. Say I can't do math. Too high. Subtract 1. Yeah, 7. You guessed it. So that's pretty much how the program would look. Again, you don't have to go into this much detail with any of it. You don't have to have this validation there. You don't have to tell them, to subtract this amount of numbers. But that's sort of how everything's going to look. I wouldn't necessarily add all of the fancy stuff in there, you might, I don't know, you can if you want, but your professor might get a little bit curious as to how, you're getting some of these lines of code, because I don't think that's discussed in the book yet. But anyway, that's kind of it for this problem. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.